I think we're going to start with an introduction.
An introduction. This is the world where we live. I'm Jared Freeland. This is John Alcock.
Welcome.
We're here once again. We're going to espouse our radical political views for all those of you who want to hear them, and those of you who do not want to hear them.
You're welcome to join us at any time.
Certainly, especially if you don't want to hear them, especially if you disagree. It's the week that was. We'll be doing this every Wednesday. Generally, try and start with topics and end up rambling out of control for the next hour to hour and a half.
More fun that way.
Absolutely. And that's it. That's all I have to say in terms of the introduction.
Well, I think that's what we're going to start with. What? William Wood.
I did a stupid thing. I watched the news, put it on TV3 2 nights ago, and the lead story was William Wood, youngest. Is he the youngest MP of?
Yeah, he is, because he was 17 when he announced his run for candidacy and was going to be 18 by the elections.
Well, that's fantastic. So the youth are getting involved. This is a good thing by all accounts. Palmerston North National MP and some leaker found an old photo that he had done pretending to be Hitler in front of the mirror, putting on a white milk moustache and, putting his hand up like a Nazi salute. The media went absolutely nuts about it, and of course his detractors, people who are against the National Party and everything they stand for, and that's the key thing to remember when it comes to these media firestorms about inconsequential nonsense. It's always the people who disagree with them politically. They jumped on the bandwagon and are now trying to say that, oh, this is so horrible, it's such a heinous thing that let's end this man's career, basically. He shouldn't be a politician. We don't want people in public office who have been caught on camera or caught on tape making any reference to the Nazi Party.
On that note, I did see a video just today that apparently the US Senate, on average, refers to Hitler 7 times a month.
It's invoking the name of Hitler to make a point.
Godwin's law.
Yeah.
That's really what everything comes down to at the end of the day. Is if you have an argument on the internet for long enough, or any argument in life, eventually somebody's going to accuse somebody of a Nazi.
Which is ridiculous. You can't be a Nazi. Let's just get this out of the way right now. The Nazis have not existed since, they were remnants of the Reich government in 1946. Then there were the Nuremberg Trials and they were executed and charged. The Nazi Party has not existed for over 60 years. You can be a neo-Nazi, but even that's a lot of people who tend to pick and choose about what they sort of believe. But really, the ridiculous notion I disagree with this person. He's a Nazi. Trump's a Nazi. Everybody's a Nazi. What does it mean? It's ridiculous.
It means nothing. It is exactly the same principle. If you say a word over and over again, it loses all its meaning. And that's literally the point that we're arrived at now, where I literally had this argument on Facebook a few times before, when somebody's accused me of being Nazi, so I just accuse them of being Nazi, because it's as meaningful as them accusing me in the first place, because neither of us are actually Nazis.
So, going back to William Wood and his faux pas.
When he was 14,
When he was 14.
When he was 14. Show me somebody who didn't do something stupid in their teenage years.
And this goes back to something my mum used to tell me. Early years of the internet. No, not the early years of the internet. So late 90s, early 2000s. It's not the early years of the internet, because we all know that in 1992, Al Gore invented the internet.
Thank you, Al Gore. We much appreciate it. Don't worry about September.
That's not what happened. Anyway, so the internet had been around for some time. My point is, it wasn't widely used in the home. Not yet. And it wasn't well understood. And the prevailing, the very nostalgic sounding wisdom of the time taught us things like don't put your full name on the internet because that's how they get you. That's obviously outdated. But the other one, which still rings true, is quite simply watch what you say on the internet and what you do, because you never know when it might come back to bite you. And I always thought this was ridiculous. And the reason I thought it was ridiculous, even back when I was just a kid and our parents were telling me to do this, I was thinking that everybody uses the internet. Everybody writes crazy stuff. We all have those silly emails, dragonslayer911 at hotmail.com or whatever. Mine was Heroes of World War II at hotmail.com.
I sent somebody a picture of a hype train the other day. That was funny.
Yeah. And we all had a good laugh because we had an English class, we had somebody come in and talk about the importance of writing a CV, and said that make sure you put the email that you put on the CV is a professional sounding one. And I remember we all turned around and had a good laugh because it was common knowledge that one of the students in my class had the email suckmeoff@hotmail.com.
Well done.
Anyway, I thought it would be so widely known that people did dumb stuff on the internet, it would become white noise.
I think so. But apparently not.
Yeah, well, 20 years later and everything, oh, you said this? Yeah, well, you said that. And it would be so common, it would lose its effect and nobody would give a damn. Unfortunately, that's not what's happened. And I'm very disappointed about that.
That's not to say that either of us don't think that people should be held accountable for particularly their actions, and to a lesser extent the way that they portray themselves either. But also, there must be a path to redemption. There has to be. People say and do stupid things all the time. It's called learning, and it's actually what sets us apart from pretty much every other species on the planet, and what makes us the dominant species on the planet, is that we can learn and experience new things, grow from experiences, learn from the mistakes of other people, which most animals can't really do, and then exceed those original parameters and get better, improve ourselves. But if you're going to hold every single thing that anyone ever does, ever, against them for all of time, you're ending that. You're ending anyone's ability to learn and improve themselves. And it cannot be this way. It can't be this way. People say and do stupid things. Yep, I do. Jared does. Everybody does. There are no exceptions. Right. Therefore, if that is the case, you must be able to learn and improve yourself over time. If you really do something that really is horrific to somebody, apologize. But don't apologize just because the woke left demands it. Because no matter what you do, no matter what you say, they're never ever going to let it go. And I say the woke left, actually, but I actually mean anyone. The right does it just as much as the left does, just not right at the moment, but they have in the past.
It's scoring political points. It's trying to get ahead. It's trying to go through thousands of hours of audio and video and countless photos and trying to pick one thing that can be used against somebody. The thing is, and of course I have to second John's point there. Look, so say if this William Wood, say if his photo pretending to have a Hitler moustache on, if that was part of a wider pattern, if he had been part of some crazy neo-Nazi group and his policy was going to be in line with fascism, yes, then that would be a major red flag. But it's not. If you have somebody, say if he murdered kittens when he was a boy, and then he went to school and he was a bully and he was a brutal sort of fiend, and then the first jobs he had, everyone said the same thing, toxic personality, he abused other people. If it's part of a legitimate pattern that we can look at, then it's a big deal. Then, by all means, if it comes out, then you can link it to other stuff and no, it's not just some inconsequential
To
photo.
show me that pattern behavior exists in the past and is continuing now. Because there are reformed members of the KKK. Daryl Thomas has found quite a few of them, and he has helped them understand that what they're saying is judging people by their immutable characteristics and is morally and ethically repugnant. That is a good thing. But just because they've been members of the KKK in the past, if they've changed their views and have legitimately reformed what they're thinking and have changed now, then you can't hold this against them forever, because all you do by enforcing that kind of logic is to force them back to the KKK, because they've got no other home to go to. And you don't want that either.
Yeah, and it isn't just the radical right-wingers. If you go to, and I know he gets a lot of a bad rap, but Bishop Brian Tamaki and Destiny Church, if you go to one of those services, you will see men there covered in tattoos who were in gangs, who were into crime and harmed countless other people. They found God. They've completely changed. You can't judge them for their past, really.
I'm not religious, but that's still a good thing. I don't really mind what people do or believe in, as long as it makes them a better person. That's really what it comes down to. And the left, again, always believes in rehabilitation of prisoners. Well, you cannot both hold that to be true and for us to spend lots of taxpayer money on rehabilitating people if you're going to hold their entire past against them forever. Those two things are mutually exclusive. Either people can change and you should be able to rehabilitate and get on with your life, or they can't. And if they can't, well, you tell me what the conclusion of that is. I'm pretty sure that's gulags and death camps, and that's just... Why do we need to go back to this? We already resolved this problem. That's what World War II is about.
Well, I only wish the gulags and the death camps ended with World War II.
Still going on, aren't they?
They did not. But really, and to say this man was 14 when he did this, completely ironically, there's no corroborating evidence that he, at any point in his life, actually sympathised with Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. So where's the statute of limitations when it comes to dumb stuff you did in your teenage years? Is it 14? Is it 18? We know our frontal lobes don't develop until we're 25. So until then, we're not really thinking that much about the future, most of us.
Are you going to hold the movie The Producers against Will Ferrell and Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick? Because Hitler was in that, but they're taking the piss out of him as well. I mean, does that count? I mean, there was somebody portraying Hitler in that movie. Did they make Hitler look like a silly faggot? Yes. Okay. Well, that's actually kind of funny. But it's also portraying Hitler. Same thing, guys.
And really, this has become very, very common, and it's especially when it's comments about race and sex and things like that, regardless of whether they're said jokingly or satirically or anything, they seem to be coming out, and there are certain sections of society which believe they have such a massive punch to them that, say you have somebody who wants to be the head of St. John Ambulance. All right. Say he has all the credentials. He's been an ambulance officer for many, many years. References check out. He's done an enormous amount of good, saved many lives, but it comes out that, he was a bit of a racist at one time and he made a few jokes and things like that when he was at work. Now, does this mean if you can prove beyond a doubt that this man devoted his life to helping other people and nothing about his conduct ever suggested that, regardless of any racist sort of ideas he had, it changed the way that he conducted his job and went to save lives, does that automatically erase all of his experience, or to the point that you're happy to promote in his place somebody who might not be the commissioner as effectively? Does it not matter at all? And let's not forget that the person who gets promoted in his place it doesn't necessarily mean they never told any racist jokes. It just means they're not on record doing them.
Can you frame that in the reverse way as well? No, you probably can't actually. You can frame that the other way around. No, I think that is a moot point. You just shouldn't be holding things against everybody eternally. And pretty much every world religion has some kind of redemption clause in it for a very good reason. It's why there's the concept of original sin in the first place. We're all born, I'm not religious, but we're all born sinners. And we have to redeem ourselves by asking for the forgiveness of God in Judeo-Christian religion. I can't really speak to Islam, but that's why people go and take the actions that they do in Islam, because it means they get to go to heaven. Well, that's a redemption clause as well. They are, in fact, redeeming themselves as well. Buddhism is another good example. If you give a good life, you get to go up the caste system. Okay, well, that's redemption too. So there's a reason why these are all part of history. It's because people evolve and change over time. And you learn from your mistakes, or at least we should encourage people to learn from your mistakes. And to set such a precedent by which there is no coming back and no redemption for anything that you do, all you're going to get is people turning around and going, well, if I can't redeem myself, fuck all of you.
There's no point in trying.
There's no point in trying. And that ends up in what I would consider to be a really horrible world where people don't care anymore.
And we've already seen that. And of course, hey, when you get utterly godless policy, you get fallacies like this. But we've already seen this because when Trump was running for president, he was running against political correctness. And he knew all along that he was going to say things that would upset people and things that would come out, which they eventually did, of him saying lewd stuff. And he needed to try and deflect that. And the left in America had become the person who cried wolf. Oh no, that's disrespectful to wolves. The person who cried danger, a dangerous animal. They complained about every single thing Trump said or did, and their attacks went off him like water off a duck's back because we'd all heard it before, and calling him a Nazi and a racist and a misogynist and an Islamophobe and a homophobe, except didn't really have much of it.
Really? I mean, a lot of the gays voted for him. There's literally a section of the Republican Party that's gays for Trump.
And there's a black conservative movement.
Yep.
He said that, why would Hispanics vote for him and everything after he said these horrible things about the Mexican people, except he didn't. He said about specific criminals. But
M13, the gang that is literally raping and pillaging children across the border. What, guys? Come on.
But to avoid Trumpism taking over this discussion entirely, I think that's the point. If you're
Hitler for the win.
If you're going to attack people for that, eventually some genuine bad boy or bad girl will come along and none of your attacks are going to work because you will have absolutely used up all of the effect of them.
I think it is basically the ultimate hypocrisy is particularly the Democrats in the US at the moment, but it will spread to all other leftist movements globally because it just always does. America always leads these things, so what you see happening there is going to happen everywhere else. It's the same thing that they're complaining about now is what the religious Republicans, conservative rights did back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And now they're doing it. No, it was wrong when the right did it then, and it's wrong that the left is doing it now. Except for some reason, everything has been topsy-turvy, upside down, and the Democrats have become the religion of hypocrisy, where it's do as I say, not as I do, and one rule for thee and another for me.
I was getting back into the local element. I was very happy to see because in all this media blitz that covered the incident, that of course they're going to talk to the National Jewish Council, and even they said, look, the man was 14. There's no evidence he said it with any conviction whatsoever. He should not be judged for that. And it was great to see both Judith Collins and Winston Peters agreeing on something. And
occasionally it happens.
Occasionally, once in a blue moon. It's a blue moon tonight. Yesterday night. Look,
explains the crazies.
But that's it. I think it's time to stop this ridiculous nonsense that you can hold things that people said many years ago. And sorry, I've got to bring Trump back into this because it's a funny story. But
pretty funny guy.
When the Access Hollywood tape came out and he was grabbing by the pussy, that stuff, we all know that. That night, my brother and I were listening to Kerry McIver on News Talk ZB, and she was not a fan of Trump even before then. Was utterly appalled and was telling all of the callers of the night, how can you possibly support a man who says things like that? The problem is we're all guilty of locker room talk. You may be, look, I'm not saying you've said anything really lewd, but even if you are of sound moral character, you would have said things to your mates, to your friends, to your family in private that you would not want to be out in the public domain, that you would not want every Tom, Dick, and Harry to see, to hear. So anyway, she takes this one caller, and it sounds like a middle-aged lady, and she says, look, I don't have a problem with what Trump said. I've been out with the girls, had a few wines and everything, and I've said much worse stuff than that. And Kerry McIver interjects. She interrupts her and says, I find that hard to believe. So you mean to tell me that you've been out with your girlfriends, having a good night, and you've said that you think you could walk up to married men and sexually assault them? And the caller replies, yes, I have.
I think the difference is that most guys don't care.
We're all guilty of so-called locker room talk.
Yep.
And look, if you think it's appropriate to judge a young MP for something that he did, ironically or whatever, it's a fair argument that you're thinking, well, look, I'm not running for office. I'm not going to be in charge of anything that important, so the rules are different for me.
But maybe one day you will.
And should you decide to do that, how would you feel if somebody who maybe you were friends with them managed to get some recording or get some photo of you doing something that enough people in society would find offensive, and that ended your whole career?
Perhaps you've been at a party, perhaps you've been had a few too many drinks, you've been having a good time with fun with your friends, but some of your friends are a bit left-leaning, you're a bit right-leaning, or the other way around. It doesn't actually matter from this kind of standpoint. And they took some photos of you and put it on Instagram. And you got caught doing some nefarious stuff. And then when you're 45, 50, and you've had a successful life, and you've got a family or career or otherwise, and you decide to go into politics because you strongly believe in something that's completely unrelated to those events, and then that friend who disagrees with you, who may not be your friend anymore, happens to have that image from 20, 30 years ago and posts it on your Facebook wall or sends it to the media.
It was the other MP that had some sexual thing to do with a pig, wasn't it? Was it a pig?
Well, that wasn't a Black Mirror episode? Because I know it was the first Black Mirror episode.
No, it was
hard to tell these days.
Gosh. Well, maybe
that's scary in itself.
I hope I'm remembering it. But yeah, and hey, it might not even be.
That was a Tony Blair thing, wasn't it?
Tony Blair, wasn't it? Possibly.
That's what the Black Mirror episode was based on. At the very least, it was a Tony Blair stand-in, and it was blackmail because apparently he had to fuck a pig or something. And this is a Black Mirror, so this is not about Tony Blair. Just to be perfectly clear, this is the Black Mirror episode. That's what the first episode was about. And Black Mirror, as we all know, is holding a Black Mirror up to us. So I don't know if that was the actual story, but there must be some reality in there somewhere, and that's how they came up with the storyline. But I think that is a valid point.
And that's the thing. We're all, and I'm so glad that there's been a lot of support for Mr. Wood as well, because at the end of the day, you know, we're all teenagers once. We're all young. We all do stupid stuff. You're not on some higher moral plane because you weren't caught on tape doing it. And
Stop being Puritans.
exactly. And Puritans, everything. Look, if you're going out drinking and things like that, and also other things, there's been quite a lot of ballyhoo. Oh, cheated on his wife. No, you're not in Parliament anymore, and things like that. Well, this thing, it might not be anything political. It could be, oh, you cheated on your girlfriend or your partner or something like that, and 40 years later, oh, that was immoral. You were really young and really drunk, but still.
I'm going to have to quote the Bible again. Let he who is out without sin cast the first stone.
And to add to that, look before you judge the speck in another man's eye, look at the plank in your own. We are all imperfect. We're all sinners. We all do stupid shit. And if you're sorry, and if it wasn't if it doesn't represent who you are as a person, then no, you shouldn't be judged for it. You should not lose your job for it. And for God's sake, it should not be the leading news article on TV3.
For New Day.
Yeah. I'm just lost for words.
That probably covers everything off quite nicely. So the second thing on the list of things that we're talking about is Green's tax policy, which two things I find really funny about that. There's a bit of a facepalm moment. Where's the Picard photo?
Impartial. Hands down here.
So two things on this. One, what I really love it, I'm actually going to see if I can make it to a Chloe Swarbrick event, because I legitimately want to know the answer to this question. Is one, if one of your policies is to tax New Zealanders with over $1 million in net wealth, 1% of their net wealth per year, why do you have an exemption for the ultra wealthy? Being that if you have a mortgage or some kind of lien over your property, whether that be your car or your house or whatever, you automatically get an exemption from this. Because surely that means anyone who's currently got a large amount of property will just get mortgages on it all and buy twice as much. Not really a wealth tax, guys. Not really achieving the objective that you're trying to achieve. So I'd love to know the answer to that question. And also from the news hub that we watched just earlier tonight, tax is love? I think tax is actually the opposite of love. Because what it does is shift the burden from you individually as a person, caring about the people in your community, and giving your philanthropic charity to those people who you think deserve it most, and it puts all of that burden onto the government and takes the burden off you. That's why in high-tax environments and high-tax countries like New Zealand, we see very low rates of philanthropy. There's just no disposable income left, and everyone turns around and says, well, that's what the government's doing with my tax, isn't it?
Well, I think first of all we need to be very careful, and the Greens obviously don't understand this very well, but you need to be very careful when it comes to taxing the wealthy and the ultra-wealthy, because with their wealth, they're also very mobile. They can put their money offshore. They can take their investments elsewhere. It's really no skin off their nose, and the last thing we want to do is give them a reason to leave. California found this out, putting wealth taxes and things like that, and other things, sort of diversity quotas and other nonsense in boards of companies, and they found that the companies were simply moving their head offices elsewhere.
Joe Rogan's moving
their business elsewhere.
He declared in a podcast just this week that he's going to move to Texas.
And we don't want this. That's bad. Everybody loses in that situation. So you do not want to drive business away and give people reasons to leave. It just makes no sense.
Forcing New Zealand business to go and domicile in Delaware, which has a very favourable tax law, and Singapore, which has a corporate tax rate of about 14%. We want to keep business here, because we've got to provide work and something valuable for New Zealanders to do, because how else do you build communities other than giving people work and jobs? And people need that so that they feel valued in their community. There is nothing more destructive for society than having everybody sit around on generational benefits for it. It's so self-destructive. And this sort of leads into a little bit of a side point, is that I'm not a fan of the way that New Zealand benefits are set up. They really don't help people get back into work. The marginal cost of going from being on some kind of full-time unemployment benefit for whatever reason, don't judge whatever reason you're on there for, but going back into full-time work, I think you're allowed to make $80 a week. Well, as soon as you start working more than, what's that, 4 hours a week? At 80, 90, it's just slightly more than 4 hours a week work. So you're telling anybody that is stuck in the benefit, that wants to improve themselves, that wants to get back out there, that wants to find a job, even if they find it through Work in New Zealand, which, by the way, is an excellent resource for that. They actually genuinely do try really hard to get you into work, having been on the benefit twice myself. Getting to that point is really, really difficult, because once you start earning work, your marginal cost, you get $4.85 to $5.85, depending on what kind of benefit you're on. Getting back into work means as soon as you do that, you lose all of that resource. And sometimes you might be only able to find 15 to 20 hours work. That's not enough to live on now. How can you get by if you've got a wife and kids, or just if you're a solo parent and you've got kids that you've got to look after? Maybe you can only do 20 hours of work a week because you've got kids. That takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And to harshly penalize people to that extent and make the marginal cost so high is completely insane. I would personally prefer to see a much more graduated system that actually helps people get back into gainful employment, because that's what makes them feel like they've got a purpose in their life and their community.
Certainly, and no doubt the continuing intergenerational welfare dependency makes it very hard to break the cycle.
Hard enough as it is.
Certainly. And to the point that there exists an enormous number of, well, it's two things really. There are people who are unemployable, basically. The reason they're unemployable is because they haven't been motivated to work, because the government's given them money to exist. They've had no work ethic or other such skills to impart to their children, which has caused massive problems down the line that are intergenerational. The problem is, and realistically, the way I see it, and National were rightly criticised very strongly for ramping up immigration in New Zealand when the infrastructure couldn't support it. This was happening in the 2010s. I don't necessarily see it as being their fault. What I believe happened is that around, say, 2005 or thereabouts, as a society in New Zealand, enough of us began to believe that it is inhumane to metaphorically point a shotgun at the head of the beneficiary and force him or her to work, if they can. Because of that, we needed an enormous number of immigrants to do jobs that Kiwis were perfectly capable of doing themselves, but what didn't. And the wealth that sorting all these jobs and getting so many more people in has created has paid for the welfare.
And has literally benefited the large globalist corporations who want to suppress wages. That's the point. And we've seen this through a few companies in New Zealand whose names I'm not going to mention, but I can think at the top of my head, having worked with them, not for them, in that we have now effectively ghettoized a bunch of rental apartments where there are lots of overseas immigrants working in various parts around the country, and they're making less than half minimum wage.
Yep.
Well, what are we doing? We're pricing Kiwis out of work.
And of course, I mean, they don't give a damn that there's a minimum wage and they're not allowed to do that. We used to go out as a flat for dinner at Masala Restaurant in Takapuna, and it was great because this is about 2012, 2013. It was great because you get $5 mains on Wednesday night. We always wondered how on earth could they afford to do this. Well, then it came out a couple of years later that they were paying the staff at Masala the equivalent of $2.50 an hour. And the reason they could do that is because quite a lot of them were overstayers, and if they disagreed, if they complained, they're going to go on the boat back home. It is a horrible problem. The media's covered it several times, and there hasn't been very much done to stop it. But hey, that's it. This is what's been allowed to happen. I believe because we have allowed people to live on welfare without any incentive to work, and it's not only harmed society, but it's harmed them as well.
I don't even think allowed is the right word. I think it is we have forced people onto welfare. We've given them no other choice. And in a lot of cases, it's not their fault. They would go and do work if they could, but they literally can't because the marginal cost is too high. The marginal cost is too high. And if your options are look after your 4, 5, 6 kids or less or more, or go to work all the time and then have to pawn off all this way a problem with early childhood education. Saying, well, I need money for early childhood education because I've got to go to work. Right, yeah, okay, this is part of the problem. Why can't we give them some of the benefit that they've got to make up the amount that they can do and let them do the work that they can do? And then as their kids slowly get older and end up going to school, then they can move into more and more work. But instead, we're incentivizing the exact opposite, to have more kids. So when their kids get up to school age, they go and have another baby. Because what? That's another $800 a week, plus the benefit that are on at the moment. Well, it's a no-brainer. I mean, I can't fault them for voting in their own interest. I literally can't. It's not fair at all.
And several months ago, we're watching a well, it's supposed to be the news. I would have called it a piece of propaganda because all it entailed was the reporters going around, getting the beneficiaries to say how much that they loved the new Labor plan to increase their benefits. And one of them was a solo mother with 7 children who was saying, "Oh well, look, I've been struggling to raise my children, and this is fantastic. The fact that they're giving me another $60 a week." And Dad and I are watching this, and I swear our reaction was probably echoed in all of Middle New Zealand. The problem there is somebody decided to have 7 children that they couldn't afford to have.
And don't tell me that prophylactics is not available. You can get as many as you want from the New Zealand Health Service for free and make your fucking guys wear them, and you can get a morning after pill.
Under the guise of, I don't even know what the official line was, but they removed the clause that the mother had to name the father before being eligible for the benefit. So they're not even going to attempt to try and track down the father and make him pay child support. Here's the money. There you go.
That's actually a bloody good point. It's not
They've given
the
up.
mother's fault.
They've absolutely given up.
Too. It is not as one-sided as it seems.
It's a debate for another day, but look, all parties are complicit in this. If you choose to be sexually active, you are absolutely responsible for the consequences and for mitigating them. And yeah, if you're a man, you are paying child support. If you're a female, yes, you have to sort out your birth control. Unless,
Funny dick, guys, don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's quite ridiculous.
I think this is a very I keep coming back to religion all the time. I'm not the religious one here either, just FYI.
My plan is working.
Slowly but surely. But there are some good moral lessons to be learned here. And I think this has been pointed out in age-old wisdom for a very long amount of time. You have to take personal responsibility. Jordan Peterson is saying it now. I'm a huge fan of Jordan Peterson. But he is just rephrasing in a modern context things that we've known for thousands and thousands of years now. There are consequences to your actions. The worst thing that we can possibly do is externalize negative externalities to other people. We need to make sure that corporations internalize their negative externalities. If they damage the environment, we want them to pay for the cost of damaging the environment. Well, if you're damaging your kids and society in general by not taking personal responsibility for your actions, it's exactly the same economic principle. You need to be made to internalize your negative externalities, which is if you have kids, if you have unprotected sex, if you get an STD, you have to live with the consequences of that. If you have a child, you have to live with the consequences of that. That's not anybody else's fault. That is a result of you and your decisions, and you need to internalize those negative externalities.
And it's certainly not the government's responsibility, i.e. yours and my and your responsibility to pay for those children that you couldn't afford to have.
Absolutely not.
Except we keep voting as if we believe it is.
Because for some reason, we think that on a corporate level, corporations should internalize their negative externalities, and on a personal level, we think we should externalize the negative externalities. And that is also a hypocritical position to hold. It is true across everywhere. We have known this in economics for God knows how long. We just don't talk about this. We don't talk about this in civics in schools. We don't talk about this in civics in general. But it is all exactly the same principle. Negative externalities need to be internalized as much as practical.
Certainly. Sorry to throw so many controversial topics at you.
Great fun, though.
That was fantastic.
Yeah.
And we can talk more about what we believe would be appropriate in schooling and in terms of general education for everybody at a later date. But no, that's
probably a good topic for next week, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a pretty big topic in of itself.
Yeah, so I was rather flustered hearing about William Woods and all the vitriol that was heaped on him.
I think tax is love is a great slogan from the Greens, but it's also entirely bullshit. So, yeah, as with pretty much everything the Greens does. But
there's something for everybody, right?
Not
really.
This is another economic principle, which I'm only going to say just here, is the principle of concentrated benefits and dispersed costs. If you disperse the costs across everybody in your population, a 2-cent increase in your tax is not something that you're prepared to spend a large amount of time on, but the benefits that you get for bribing that section of the population, they could be getting hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And that's why it works.
The problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money.
I think that's a fantastic quote, actually. I love that quote.
Well, it's Margaret Thatcher. Of course, it's going to be a great quote.
Oh, don't make me side with her.
We need something like her at a time like this.
As much as I like Maggie Thatcher, yeah, she did some pretty horrible shit too. But that's probably a fantastic place to end, so that we don't waffle on ad infinitum. And
45 minutes. That's pretty trim.
Not bad. Yeah, that's actually pretty slim for us.
All right.
Yeah. Must be doing the keto diet.
Well, join us next week if you found this interesting.
Take care.
Cheers.